My daughter told me I didn't deserve to live in her house. 2 days after her birthday. My name is Peter Morales. I'm 56 years old, and in that moment, standing in the kitchen I paid for, built with my hands and maintained for decades, my daughter Emma called me a worthless old man. She wasn't whispering either. Her billionaire boyfriend, Bradford Hayes III, was sitting right there, smirking into his champagne glass while Emma broadcast it live to her 500,000 Instagram followers. I stood there holding a paper plate of leftover cake, while she laughed and told the world I was an embarrassment. What Emma didn't know was that the $3 million beach house she claimed was hers wasn't, and the one across town, the one she flaunted to her friends as part of her brand, that one wasn't hers either. They were mine, both of them. But I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even tell her the truth. I just smiled, walked back to my room, and quietly pulled out an old notepad with 3 phone numbers written inside. Because the next morning, before sunrise, those houses would no longer belong to either of us. If you're watching this, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Because this story isn't about losing everything. It's about how I taught my daughter a lesson she'll never forget. And it all started the moment I made the first call. At 5:15 the next morning, the house was quiet except for the ocean outside. I sat at the worn oak table in the kitchen, the same one Emma once did her homework on, back when she still called me Dad instead of loser. The notepad was open in front of me. 3 names, 3 numbers. The first call was to a man I'd known longer than Emma had been alive, Calvin Reyes, the real estate attorney who helped me buy the beach house 27 years ago. Back then, I was a construction foreman pulling in 40 grand a year, patching drywall by day and sketching renovation plans by night. Every extra dollar I saved went into that house. Calvin made sure my name was the only one on the deed. He picked up on the second ring. Peter, it's early. Everything all right? Everything's perfect, I told him. I'm ready to sell. Both properties. Today. There was silence, then a low whistle. Both? Peter, you serious? As serious as the night I signed those papers. Can you make it happen? Calvin promised to clear his schedule. By the time the sun edged above the horizon, paperwork was in motion. I hung up and stared at the quiet house around me. Every corner held a memory. Emma's 8th birthday when we turned the living room into a carnival. Sarah's laughter when she burned her first attempt at baking bread. Late nights when the 3 of us built furniture out of scrap wood just to see if we could. Emma had forgotten all that. Or maybe she'd chosen to, because now Emma Morales wasn't just my daughter. She was Emma Hayes, social media darling, personal brand ambassador, girlfriend of Bradford. Hayes III, the man whose family measured status by Lamborghinis and Gulfstream jets, and in their world, an old man in flannel, shirts and a pickup truck was nothing more than a stain on the glossy picture. I'd seen her Instagram post from the night before, a staged photo on the beach with Bradford's arm around her, champagne in her hand, and the caption, manifesting bigger spaces. Daddy's finally giving us the house we deserve. 24 hours and it's ours, beach life. 50,000 likes in an hour. Hundreds of comments cheering her on. Not one mention of the man who built that house brick by brick. By mid-morning, Calvin confirmed buyers were already lined up. That's the thing about prime property in California. It doesn't wait around. I leaned back in the chair, exhaustion settling into my bones. But beneath it all was something sharper, steadier. For the first time in years, I felt control. Emma thought she'd written me out of the picture. But the truth was, she was playing a game on a board I'd built long before she was old enough to walk. And as I prepared to make the second call, I knew this wasn't just about selling property. It was about pulling the rug out from under a daughter who thought money made her untouchable. The phone buzzed. Emma's name lit up the screen. I stared at it, heartbeat loud in my ears. She was calling before noon. That meant the post had worked. Bradford was pushing, and she thought she'd won. I let it ring until it stopped. Then I dialed the second number on my notepad. The moment the voice answered on the other end, I knew this story was about to take a turn even Emma couldn't spin on Instagram. Peter ignores Emma's call and dials his second contact. The second number on my notepad belonged to someone Emma had never heard of, but who had shaped my life more than she'd ever realize. Her name was Margaret Chan. We'd worked side by side at the construction company 30 years ago, back when I was just a foreman saving every penny. Margaret had since built a reputation as the sharpest realtor on the coast, the kind of woman who could turn a for sale sign into a bidding war before it even hit the market. When she answered, her voice was brisk and no nonsense, just as I remembered. Peter, been a long time. Too long, Margaret. I need you to move fast. I'm selling the beach house and the hillside property. Both of them. She didn't even pause. You finally ready to cash out? I'm ready to teach someone a lesson. There was a beat of silence. Then the low chuckle of a woman who understood exactly what I meant. Send me the details. I'll have buyers lined up by dinner. I thanked her, hung up, and sat back. 2 calls down. The gears were turning, but Emma wasn't quiet. By noon, my phone buzzed again and again with texts. Dad, answer your phone. Bradford and I need to meet the lawyer today. Stop being dramatic. Just hand over the deed. Do you want me to embarrass you in front of everyone? Because I will. Each one was like a blade, sharp and careless. She didn't even ask how I was. Didn't care that I'd been up since dawn. All she cared about was flaunting a life she hadn't earned. I drove into town in my old Ford pickup, the one Emma hated. The paint was chipped, the radio only played static half the time, and the engine groaned like an old dog on cold mornings. But it was mine. It had hauled lumber, carried groceries, and brought Emma home from the hospital when she was born. I parked in front of the bank, a place I'd visited every month for 3 decades. Inside, the manager greeted me by name. Another thing Emma would never understand. Status wasn't about money. It was about trust, built brick by brick over years. While paperwork moved, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass doors. Flannel shirt, work boots, lines carved deep from sun and time. Emma saw a man past his prime. But standing there, I felt something else entirely. A man about to turn the tide. That night, Margaret called back. Peter, I've got 3 buyers fighting over the beach house already. We'll have contracts tomorrow. As for the hillside place, let's just say it's going to surprise some people. I knew what she meant. The hillside house was the one Emma flaunted as hers. She'd told every follower it was a gift from Bradford's family, part of their empire. The truth was written in black and white at the county office. Peter Morales, sole owner. I hung up just as headlights swept across the driveway. A sleek black Lamborghini idled outside, bass thumping through the glass. Emma climbed out first, phone in hand, already recording. Bradford followed, his smile smug and predatory. Through the window, I watched them walk up the path, laughter spilling into the night. Emma raised her phone toward the house and said into the camera, "Say goodbye, guys. Tomorrow, this baby's ours." Bradford's arm slid around her waist, and he kissed her temple like he already owned the world. Then Emma's eyes lifted and locked with mine through the glass. Her smile faltered. Emma arrives in person with Bradford, ready to take what she thinks is hers. But Peter's plan is already in motion. Emma's knuckles rapped hard against the front door before I could even reach it. I opened it slow, steady, the smell of her perfume hitting me before her voice did. "Dad," she said flatly, phone still angled toward her face. "We need to talk." Bradford stepped in behind her, sunglasses still on even though it was night. He slipped his hand into his jacket pocket like he was about to sign a $1 billion deal. I stood aside, letting them walk in. Emma's heels clicked across the wood floors, Bradford's cologne filling the room. They didn't pause to take in the home, the photos on the wall, the old recliner where Emma once curled up to watch cartoons. They moved through it like inspectors, already deciding what to tear down. Emma spun on her heel, camera still live. "Guys, meet my dad, the man who built this place." But finally realized it's time to hand it over to the next generation. Her smile was plastic, her eyes cold. "Turn that thing off," I said quietly. She lowered it, but only because Bradford raised his hand and pressed it down. He wasn't here to film. He was here to finish business. "Peter," he said smoothly, his voice oily with practiced charm, "we appreciate you holding the place for us this long. Emma and I are ready to make it ours officially. So let's just get the paperwork from your lawyer and wrap this up." I looked at him for a long moment, then turned my eyes back to Emma. She wouldn't meet them. "You think this house is yours," I said. "But do you even know whose name is on the deed?" Her jaw tightened. "Stop playing games. Everyone knows it's mine. I posted it. I told my followers. You're making me look stupid." Bradford stepped closer, towering in his designer shoes. "Let's cut through the drama. You're old. You don't need this place. We do. You hand it over, or we'll have it tied up in court before the month's over. I've got lawyers who chew guys like you up before breakfast." I almost laughed. I'd been threatened before, by landlords, bosses, debt collectors back in the day, but never by a kid who thought wealth was measured in watch bands and sports cars. "I already called my lawyer," I said calmly. For a moment, silence. Emma's eyes darted. Bradford's smirk slipped. "You what?" Emma's voice cracked, higher pitched now. "Yesterday morning. The sale's in motion. Both houses are gone by sunrise." The room went still. Bradford's hand froze mid-gesture, his mouth half open. Emma's phone slipped slightly in her grip, the red recording light blinking like a warning. "You're lying," she whispered. I shook my head. "For 30 years I kept my word. Worked every day, saved every dime, and put it into these homes. And in one night I kept another promise, that nobody, not even my own daughter, would take them for granted." Emma's face drained of color. Bradford grabbed her arm, pulling her closer. "He's bluffing. Houses don't move that fast." But he was wrong, because just then, headlights cut across the driveway again. A second car, sleek, expensive, and when the door opened, Margaret Chan stepped out, contracts in hand. Emma's mouth dropped open, and for the first time that night, she realized this wasn't her stage. This was mine. Margaret, the realtor, arrives in person with paperwork, proof that the houses are already being sold. Emma's perfect Instagram world is seconds from collapsing. The rain that night didn't sound like rain. It sounded like applause, the kind of cruel, mocking applause you'd hear after failing spectacularly on stage. Peter sat in the dim kitchen of Margaret's cottage, a chipped ceramic mug cooling between his hands. The clock ticked on the wall, each second dragging, reminding him of the silence that had replaced the chaos of the day. His daughter's voice still rang in his ears. Emma, trembling with rage, her words like knives. "You ruined me. Dad, you embarrassed me in front of Bradford, in front of the world." He had stood still, absorbing it all like he had for years. Every tantrum, every dismissal, every shallow remark that chipped away at the bond they once shared. But tonight something was different. Tonight she hadn't just insulted him. She'd looked at him as if he were nothing, as if 30 years of sacrifice were worthless compared to a boyfriend's Lamborghini and a hollow promise of status. Peter sipped the bitter coffee. Margaret leaned against the counter, arms crossed, eyes heavy with concern. "You didn't deserve that," she said softly. Peter gave a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe not. But she's still my daughter. Margaret's expression darkened. Peter, she's not the same girl you raised. Bradford's poisoned her. You know it. Peter's jaw tightened. He knew it too well. But admitting it out loud felt like giving up on Emma completely. And he wasn't ready for that. Outside, headlights cut across the rain-smeared window. Tires crunched against gravel. Peter's pulse quickened. He stood peering through the glass and saw the unmistakable glint of Bradford's silver sports car. Of course, Peter muttered. The car door slammed. Then another. Voices carried over the storm. Emma's, high-pitched and sharp, followed by Bradford's smooth, commanding tone. The sound of footsteps approached, hurried, deliberate. Peter! Margaret's voice was tense now. Don't open that door. But he already was. Because deep down, Peter knew there was no avoiding this confrontation. The door swung wide, the storm spilling in with them. Emma was drenched, her mascara streaked, her designer dress clinging to her like a costume that no longer fit. Bradford, pristine despite the rain, carried himself with that same nauseating arrogance, like the storm itself had been instructed not to touch him. Emma's eyes blazed. Dad, you've ruined everything. Do you have any idea what you've done? Peter stood still, silent. He had learned that silence could be more powerful than any retort. But Bradford, never one to let silence linger, stepped forward. What he's done, Bradford said smoothly, is destroy years of planning. You think you're clever, old man, selling those houses overnight. Do you realize what you cost, Emma? What you cost me? Peter's voice was calm, almost too calm. They were never yours to begin with. Emma stomped her heel against the floor like a child. I lived in that house. Everyone knew it was mine. No, Peter said softly. You stayed there. You posed for photos there. But you never understood what it took to make it a home. Bradford sneered. Spare us the lecture. You're clinging to scraps of dignity while throwing away generational wealth. Do you realize who I am? Peter finally met his gaze. I do. You're a man who thinks money makes him untouchable. But tonight, in this house, it doesn't. The room felt smaller now. The storm rattled the windows. The clock on the wall ticking louder with each second. Margaret hovered near the counter, her hand resting on a drawer as though she were preparing for something. Peter couldn't yet see. Emma's voice cracked as she shrieked. Dad, just give him what he wants. Sign over whatever's left. Stop being stubborn for once in your life. Peter's heart twisted. His daughter wasn't pleading with him. She was pleading for Bradford. That cut deeper than anything else. Emma, he whispered, did you even hear yourself? She faltered just for a moment. But Bradford slid a hand around her shoulder, squeezing as if to remind her of her allegiance. She straightened. Bradford leaned closer to Peter, lowering his voice. You're done, old man. You've humiliated Emma publicly. You've cost me credibility. Do you think people in my circle won't hear about this? Do you think I'll let it slide? Peter didn't flinch. You think too much about circles, Bradford. Real men don't need them. Bradford's smile twisted. You always wanted to be noble. That's why you're broke. That's why your daughter looks at you with disgust. Emma flinched at the words, but she said nothing. Peter stepped back, suddenly weary. He wasn't afraid of Bradford, not in the way Bradford wanted him to be. But he feared losing Emma completely, feared that whatever thread still connected them would snap tonight. Get out, Peter said firmly. Bradford's brows shot up. Excuse me? You heard me, Peter said, his voice steady. You come into my house on my land? With your threats and your smugness, enough, get out. Emma's eyes widened. Dad! Emma, Peter interrupted, his voice breaking just slightly. I love you. But if you choose to stand with him tonight, you're choosing his world over mine. And I don't know if there's a way back from that. For the first time, silence fell. Emma's lip trembled. Her eyes darted between her father and Bradford. For a heartbeat, Peter thought, hoped, she might step toward him. But Bradford laughed. A cold, hollow laugh that seemed to suck the warmth from the room. "You really don't get it, do you?" Bradford reached inside his coat. The movement was subtle, practiced. His hand emerged, not with a wallet, not with keys, but with the gleam of cold steel. "A gun," Margaret gasped. Peter froze. Emma's hand flew to her mouth. Bradford leveled the weapon, his smirk widening. "You should have signed, old man. Now you're going to learn the hard way what happens when you embarrass me." The clock ticked once more. The storm howled, and in that suspended second, everything Peter had feared, everything he had fought to protect, balanced on the edge of Bradford's finger. The storm outside roared like an angry beast, pounding against the cottage walls, as though nature itself demanded to witness what was unfolding inside. Rain hammered the roof in relentless rhythm, the old house groaning under the weight of wind and time. Bradford stood in the center of the kitchen, the gun gleaming under the flickering overhead light. His posture was too casual, almost theatrical, like a predator who had rehearsed this moment in the mirror 1,000 times. Emma stood frozen, mascara streaks running down her face. She looked like a porcelain doll that had been dropped, her features cracked by fear, shame, and confusion. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Peter's heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing louder than the storm. He'd faced down financial ruin, ridicule, and betrayal from the very child he'd raised. But never before had he stared into the hollow circle of a gun barrel. And yet, strangely, his fear wasn't for himself. It was for Emma, his little girl, the one who used to cling to his hand at the county fair, terrified of the Ferris wheel, but brave enough to try because he was there. He saw her now, standing at the side of a man who had poisoned her mind, and his chest ached with something worse than terror, grief. "Put it down, Bradford," Peter said evenly, forcing calm into his voice. "This isn't the way." Bradford smirked. "Don't lecture me, old man. You've had your turn at control. This is mine." Emma's voice finally broke through. "Bradford, please." Her voice cracked, weak, barely audible. "Quiet," Bradford snapped, not taking his eyes off Peter. His finger flexed against the trigger, not fully squeezing, but close enough that every second was a razor's edge. Margaret moved slightly near the counter, her hand still resting on the drawer Peter had noticed earlier. Her eyes were wide, her lips pressed tightly together. Peter caught the flicker of movement in his peripheral vision, but he gave no sign. He focused entirely on Bradford. "You think this makes you powerful?" he asked softly. Bradford tilted his head. "It makes me the man in charge, which is more than I can say for you. You're a relic, Peter, an embarrassment. Emma deserves better. With me, she'll live the life she was meant to, without you dragging her down." Peter's voice cracked with pain. "Is that what you told her? That I'm the weight holding her back? That love means nothing unless it's wrapped in gold?" Emma's lip trembled. She looked at Bradford, then back at her father, her eyes a battlefield of loyalty and guilt. Bradford laughed low and cold. "Love doesn't pay for private jets. Love doesn't get you into the right clubs. Love doesn't buy a 5 million penthouse. Love," Peter whispered, "is the only thing that keeps you from dying alone." The words landed heavy, even on Emma. Her eyes welled, her breath hitching. For the first time in years, Peter saw a crack in the armor she had built around herself. Bradford, however, scoffed. "Spare me the Hallmark garbage." He stepped closer, the gun now just feet from Peter's chest. "You cost me everything. The houses, the respect, the connections. People don't cross me, Peter, not without paying." Peter held his ground. His voice was steady, but inside every nerve screamed, "Then take it out on me." "Leave Emma out of this." Bradford barked a laugh. "Oh no. She's part of this now. She needs to see what happens to people who defy me. That way she'll never forget who her real future is tied to. Emma gasped. Bradford, stop, please. Her voice was sharper now, desperate, cutting through the storm like lightning. For the briefest second, Bradford glanced at her. That second was enough. Margaret's hand flew from the drawer, and in one swift motion, she pulled out a heavy cast-iron skillet. With a cry that was equal parts terror and courage, she swung. The skillet connected with Bradford's forearm, the sound a sickening crack. The gun clattered to the floor. Bradford roared in pain, clutching his arm, fury flashing in his eyes. Run! Margaret screamed. But Peter didn't run. Instead, he lunged for the weapon, sliding across the worn wooden floor. His fingers wrapped around the cold metal just as Bradford's boot came crashing down, narrowly missing his hand. The two men grappled, the storm outside matching their chaos inside. Bradford's rage was volcanic, his face twisted, spittle flying as he shouted curses. Peter grunted, using every ounce of strength his aging body could muster. Emma screamed, torn between horror and disbelief, as she watched her father and her lover, locked in a deadly struggle. Bradford managed to slam Peter against the counter, the breath whooshing out of him. His hand clawed at the gun, his eyes wild. You think you can beat me? You're nothing. Peter's vision blurred, but he held on. His voice rasped through clenched teeth. Maybe I am nothing, but I'll never be you. With a surge of desperate strength, Peter twisted, shoving Bradford off balance. The younger man stumbled, hitting the edge of the table hard. The gun slid across the floor, spinning to a stop at Emma's feet. The room froze. Emma stared down at it, her body trembling. Her reflection warped in the polished metal. Her father bleeding and breathless. Bradford panting and seething. Margaret, wide-eyed and clutching the skillet like a shield. All eyes were on her. Bradford's voice softened, silky, manipulative. Emma, sweetheart, pick it up, give it to me. You know where your future lies. You know who takes care of you. Don't let him poison you against me. Peter's voice weak but urgent. Emma, look at me. I'm not asking you to pick sides. I'm asking you to really see who he is. Her chest heaved. Tears blurred her vision. She had been pulled in both directions for so long, but now the choice wasn't theoretical. It was a gun lying at her feet. The storm seemed to hold its breath. Slowly, Emma bent down. Her hand shook as she reached for the weapon. She picked it up, the weight foreign in her grasp. Her fingers curled around the handle, her breath ragged. Bradford's smile spread, confident, smug. That's it, darling. Now, give it here. But Emma didn't move toward him. Instead, she raised the gun. Not toward her father, not toward Margaret, toward Bradford. Emma. Bradford's smile faltered. What are you doing? Her voice was raw, breaking. I'm seeing you. For the first time. Silence swallowed the room. The storm raged outside. But inside it was only Emma. Her shaking hands, and the truth finally clawing its way to the surface. Bradford's eyes narrowed. His tone turned dangerous. You wouldn't dare. Emma's tears streamed freely now. You've taken everything from me. My dignity, my father, my sanity, but you won't take this moment. The gun trembled in her hands, the decision hanging heavier than the storm clouds above. Peter, his chest heaving, whispered hoarsely, Emma, whatever you do, do it because it's yours. Not because of him. Not because of me, yours. The room seemed to collapse into a single heartbeat. Emma's finger hovered over the trigger. Bradford tensed, calculating, waiting for an opening. Emma's hands trembled around the gun. The weight of it seemed heavier than stone, pressing down not only on her palms but on her soul. The storm outside roared, a savage drumbeat urging her to decide. Lightning cracked, illuminating the fear in Bradford's eyes for the first time. He was no longer the arrogant heir, no longer the man with the perfect smirk and expensive suits. He was cornered, vulnerable, his future hanging by the thread of a woman he thought he owned. Her chest rose and fell, shallow breaths breaking against sobs. For years Emma had been caught between two worlds, the simple, steady love of her father and the seductive power of Bradford's wealth. Now, for the first time, she realized neither world could coexist. "Emma," Bradford whispered, voice sugar-coated with venom. "Think about everything I've given you. The trips, the parties, the life you dreamed of. You wouldn't have any of it without me. You need me." Emma's knuckles whitened around the grip. Her voice cracked, fragile but defiant. "No, Bradford. I never needed you. I wanted to believe I did, but you only gave me cages with golden bars." He took a cautious step forward, palms raised. "Baby, don't do this. You're emotional. You'll regret it. Just hand it over, and we'll laugh about this tomorrow." Her aim wavered, but her eyes hardened. For the first time in years, she looked like the little girl Peter remembered, fierce, determined, unwilling to let anyone steal her truth. Peter, bloodied and battered against the counter, found his voice. It was rough, barely more than a rasp, but it carried the weight of decades.
"Emma, you don't have to prove yourself to me."
Or to him. Whatever you decide, it has to be yours. That's what makes it real. Her lip trembled. She looked from Bradford to her father, then back again. Every memory raced. Through her mind, her father's tired smile as he helped her with homework at midnight. The first designer bag Bradford ever bought her. The day she called. Peter pathetic, just to impress the man now standing in front of her. Shame burned through her veins like fire. Margaret, silent until now, spoke in a firm, steady tone. "Emma, people like Bradford survive on fear. Once you stop feeding them, they starve." Bradford's mask cracked. His eyes darkened, and the silky charm evaporated. "You stupid little girl," he spat, venom dripping from every syllable. "You think you can turn on me? You are nothing without me." "Nothing!" Emma flinched, but something inside her snapped, not in weakness, but in strength. The fear that had bound her for so long shattered, replaced by fury. She steadied the gun with both hands. "No, Bradford," she said, her voice clear, sharp as broken glass. "I'm nothing because of you. But with him," she nodded toward her father, "I've always been enough." The words landed like a hammer. Bradford lunged. Time slowed. Emma's scream pierced the storm as her finger tightened on the trigger. A deafening crack split the room, louder than thunder. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. Bradford staggered, shock etched across his face. He clutched his shoulder, crimson blooming through his expensive suit. His knees buckled, and he crashed to the floor, groaning, curses spilling from his mouth. Emma dropped the gun, sobs racking her body. "Oh my God, oh my God!" Peter, ignoring the pain in his ribs, dragged himself toward her. He wrapped his arms around her trembling frame, pulling her close. "It's over, sweetheart. It's over!" But it wasn't, not yet. Bradford writhed on the ground, his fury undimmed even as blood pooled beneath him. "You'll regret this. Both of you! I'll ruin you." Margaret, steady as stone, stepped forward and kicked the gun far out of reach. Then she pulled out her phone, her voice calm as she called the police. "Yes, we need an officer and an ambulance. Domestic assault, armed. He's injured but stable." The sirens came quickly, their wails cutting through the storm. Blue and red lights splashed across the cottage walls. Officers stormed in, weapons drawn, securing Bradford before he could spew another word. He fought, of course, spitting, shouting threats. But it was over. The cuffs clicked shut, and the man who thought he owned everything was reduced to nothing more than a criminal on the floor. As the paramedics loaded him onto the stretcher, his eyes found Emma's one last time. Pure hatred, pure promise of revenge. But she didn't flinch. For the first time, she looked back without fear. And then he was gone. The house felt impossibly quiet. The storm had eased, the thunder rolling off into the distance. Only the sound of Emma's sobs and Peter's heavy breathing remained. She clung to her father like a child, her words broken. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I was blind. I was cruel. I hurt you." Peter stroked her hair, tears mixing with the dirt and blood on his face. "You were lost. But you're here now. That's all that matters." Margaret closed the folder of contracts, her eyes softening. "The houses are sold, Peter. By tomorrow, you'll have the freedom you always wanted. But tonight, maybe you already got what you needed most." Peter looked at his daughter, fragile yet fierce in his arms. For the first time in years, he felt hope. Not in the money, not in the houses, but in the possibility of forgiveness, of rebuilding what was broken. Emma pulled back, her eyes searching his. "Will you let me try again? To be the daughter you deserved?" His chest ached, but he smiled through the pain. "I never stopped wanting you, Emma. Not once." The storm outside faded into silence. Dawn crept over the horizon, pale light spilling into the room. The nightmare was over, but the story wasn't finished. Because families don't end with broken walls or signed deeds. They end or begin again when someone decides to fight for love over power. And for the first time in a long time, Peter and Emma decided together.